The desert stretched before Jake Morrow like a vast graveyard of broken promises, each grain of sand holding the memory of men who'd thought they could outrun their past. He'd been riding for 3 days straight, his horse's breathing labored, his own lips cracked and bleeding from the unforgiving New Mexico sun. The canteen had run dry 12 miles back, and the town of Redemption Creek was still nothing but a shimmer on the horizon, if it even existed at all. Some men said it was real, a last refuge for those who'd worn out their welcome everywhere else. Others whispered it was just a fever dream, a mirage that lured desperate souls to their deaths in the wasteland. Jake figured he'd find out soon enough, though finding out didn't much concern him anymore. What concerned him was the silence, the kind of silence that pressed against your eardrums until you heard your own heartbeat like war drums. He'd crossed into territory where even the vultures seemed to think twice about circling, where the rocks themselves looked like they'd witnessed unspeakable things and decided to keep quiet about it. His hand rested on the Colt Peacemaker at his hip, a weapon that had saved his life 4 times and taken 7 others. He knew every scratch on its handle, every imperfection in the cylinder. That gun was the only honest friend he had left in this world. The canyon walls rose up around him as the trail narrowed, casting shadows that felt alive with malice. Jake had learned long ago to trust his instincts, and right now every fiber of his being screamed that he wasn't alone out here. Not anymore. He'd felt eyes on him since sunup, felt the prickle on the back of his neck that comes when someone's drawing a bead on you from distance. But each time he'd turned, scanning the ridgelines with sun-strained eyes, there'd been nothing but rock and scrub brush and that damned oppressive heat. Maybe his mind was playing tricks after 72 hours without real sleep. Maybe the guilt was finally catching up, taking the form of phantom pursuers in the wilderness. Then he heard it, the metallic click that every gunfighter knows in his bones, the sound of a hammer being pulled back on a rifle. Time slowed to molasses. Jake's hand flew to his Colt, but he knew he was already too late. You can't outdraw a bullet that's already been aimed at your spine, can't reason with a finger that's already on the trigger. His horse sensed it too, ears flattening, muscles tensing beneath the saddle. In that frozen moment before the thunder came, Jake Morrow thought about Sarah, about the ranch they'd planned to build up in Colorado, about the child she'd been carrying when the Reynolds gang came through. He thought about mercy and how little he deserved it. The gunshot shattered the silence like a hammer through glass, the echo bouncing off canyon walls until it sounded like a dozen rifles firing at once. Jake's horse reared, nearly throwing him from the saddle as he fought for control. But here's what twisted his guts into knots. The bullet hadn't hit him. He was still breathing, still bleeding from those cracked lips, still very much alive. Which meant whoever fired that shot either had the worst aim in the territory, or they'd missed on purpose. And Jake Morrow knew from hard experience that in the West, when someone spares your life, it's usually because they've got something worse than death planned for you. Now, before we ride deeper into Jake's story and find out who fired that shot and why it missed, I need you to do something for me. If you're the kind of person who loves real Western tales, the kind where honor means something, where every decision carries weight, and where the desert keeps secrets darker than any dungeon, then you need to hit that subscribe button right now. This channel is built for folks who understand that the Old West wasn't just about quick draws and saloon brawls. It was about men and women making impossible choices in impossible situations, about codes of conduct written in blood and dust, about the fine line between justice and revenge. Smash that like button if you're ready to hear how Jake Morrow's bad day got a whole lot worse, and how one missed shot set in motion a chain of events that would change Redemption Creek forever. These stories don't tell themselves, and I can only keep bringing them to you if you show me you want more. The algorithm doesn't care about quality storytelling. It cares about engagement. So engage. Let it know that real Western legends matter. And here's what I really want from you. Drop a comment telling me what country and city you're watching from. I want to know if these American frontier tales are reaching folks in Brazil, Germany, Japan, Australia, or right here in the heartland. The West might be American history, but the themes, redemption, survival, facing your demons, those are universal. So tell me, where are you listening from? Are you in Sao Paulo or Sydney, Toronto or Tokyo? Let me know, and while you're at it, tell me if you think Jake's going to make it out of this canyon alive. Now let's get back to that echoing gunshot and find out what kind of hell Jake Morrow just rode into. Jake's hand remained frozen on his colt, his heart hammering so hard he could hear it over his horse's nervous stamping. 5 seconds passed, then 10. The echo of the gunshot faded into the canyon's eternal silence, leaving him alone with his racing thoughts and the certainty that someone out there held all the cards. His eyes swept the ridgeline again, slower this time, looking for any irregularity in the rocks, any shadow that sat wrong, any glint of metal in the afternoon sun. Nothing. Whoever fired that shot had either moved with supernatural speed or possessed enough fieldcraft to make the landscape itself into camouflage. "Easy, girl," Jake whispered to his mare, though his own nerves were stretched wire-tight. The horse's name was Delilah, a bay-quarter horse with more heart than sense, who'd carried him through situations that would have killed a lesser animal. She'd been Sarah's horse originally, a wedding gift from her father who'd run cattle in Wyoming before the hard winter of '86 broke him. Keeping Delilah alive had become something of a sacred duty for Jake, a promise to a dead woman that he'd preserve at least one thing she'd loved, even if he couldn't preserve himself. "You ride like a man with demons on his tail." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, bouncing off the canyon walls until Jake couldn't pin down its source. It was an old man's voice, rough as boot leather, carrying the accent of someone who'd been born speaking Spanish before learning English as a necessary evil. But out here, the demons don't chase. They wait. They know everyone comes to them eventually, so why waste the energy? Jake's colt cleared leather in a smooth draw that would have impressed the fastest guns in Tombstone, but he had nothing to aim at except rocks and shadows. "Show yourself," he called out, hating how his voice cracked slightly on the second word. 3 days without water would do that to a man. "You took a shot, so you've got something to say. Let's hear it face to face." A dry chuckle echoed through the canyon. "I took a shot at the rattlesnake that was about to put fangs in your horse's leg, gringo. Look down. Left side, 2 feet from the front hoof." Jake's gaze dropped, and sure enough, there it was. A diamondback nearly 4 feet long, its head blown clean off, still twitching in the death throes that snakes perform even after their brain stops functioning. The thing had been coiled to strike, and in another second Delilah would have been snake-bit, and Jake would have been walking. In this heat, that meant dying. "I'm coming down," the voice announced. "Don't shoot me just because you're embarrassed that I saved your life. Bad manners, that would be." Movement caught Jake's eye, a figure emerging from what had looked like solid rock face, revealing itself to be a cunningly concealed crevice in the canyon wall. The man who stepped into the light looked like he'd been carved from the same stone as the desert, all angles and weathered surfaces. He carried a Winchester rifle with the casual comfort of someone who'd been holding weapons longer than most men had been alive. Jake put his age somewhere north of 70, but those eyes were sharp as broken bottle glass. "Name's Esteban Rojas," the old man said, not lowering the rifle but not exactly pointing it at Jake either. "I've been living in these canyons for more years than you've been breathing. I know every snake, every scorpion, every man who passes through here thinking he's going to disappear into the desert and start fresh. Doesn't work that way. The desert doesn't let you start fresh. It strips you down to what you really are." Jake slowly holstered his colt, a gesture of peace that went against every survival instinct screaming in his head. "Jake Morrow. And I appreciate the snake killing, even if your method nearly gave me a heart attack. You always greet strangers by firing rifles near their heads." He tried to keep his tone light, but the tension in his shoulders betrayed him. This old man radiated danger the way a campfire radiates heat, steady, constant, and likely to burn you if you got too close. Esteban's face cracked into something that might have been a smile if it had contained any warmth. "Only when those strangers are being hunted by people who know how to kill quiet and efficient. You think you're alone out here, Jake Morrow? You think that posse from Silver Falls just gave up and went home after you crossed the territorial line? Men like Dutch Kincaid don't respect borders. They don't respect laws. They respect blood and they respect fear, and right now you've given them both reasons to keep coming. The name Dutch Kincaid hit Jake like a physical blow, stealing whatever breath the desert heat had left him. He'd known the posse was persistent. You don't shoot a sheriff's brother and expect a warm farewell. But he'd hoped, prayed even, that crossing into New Mexico would buy him time. Dutch Kincaid changed everything. The man was a legend, a bounty hunter who'd never failed to bring back his quarry. Though whether they came back breathing depended entirely on how much trouble they'd given him along the way. "How do you know about Dutch?" Jake asked, though part of him didn't want the answer. Esteban lowered his Winchester, but the gesture felt more like indifference than trust. "I know about Dutch because he passed through here yesterday morning. Him and 4 others. They're not tracking you the way most Pazis do, following obvious trails and asking obvious questions. Dutch, he thinks like Prey thinks. He asks himself where a desperate man would go, what choices a desperate man would make when the choices run thin. And somehow, every damn time, he guesses right." The old man spat into the dust, a gesture that conveyed more contempt than a dozen curse words ever could. Jake felt his stomach drop like a stone down a well. Yesterday morning meant Dutch was maybe 12 hours ahead of him, could be waiting in Redemption Creek right now, setting up whatever trap his twisted mind had devised. If he's ahead of me, then I need to circle back, find another route. Even as he said it, Jake knew how it sounded. Weak, panicked, the words of a man who'd already lost before the final hand was dealt. The desert offered precious few routes through this particular stretch of territory, and every alternative added days he didn't have to a journey his water supply couldn't support. "You can run," Esteban agreed, though his tone suggested he was discussing theoretical options rather than practical ones. "You can turn that horse around and ride back the way you came, maybe swing north toward Santa Fe. Throw yourself on the mercy of the territorial marshal. Of course, that marshal happens to be Dutch Kincaid's cousin, so I'll let you imagine how that mercy would play out. Or you can keep riding toward Redemption Creek and face whatever's waiting there. At least that way you die on your own terms instead of slowly baking to death in this wasteland." The casual way Esteban discussed Jake's death options should have been offensive, but instead it struck him as oddly refreshing. Too many people offered false comfort, meaningless reassurances that everything would work out fine. This old man dealt in reality, harsh and unvarnished, the kind that actually helped a person make clear decisions. "You seem to know a lot about my situation for a hermit who lives in the rocks," Jake observed. "Dutch tell you he was hunting me? Share the details of my alleged crimes?" Esteban's laugh was like wind through dead branches. "Dutch didn't have to tell me anything. I recognized your horse, that bay mare with the white star on her forehead. I knew a woman who rode a horse exactly like that, back when I still visited Redemption Creek for supplies. Sarah Morrow, she was called. Sweet girl who'd married a rancher with more dreams than sense. Then I heard the Reynolds gang hit their place, heard about what they did to her. Heard her husband went a little crazy afterward, tracked down the men responsible, shot them all dead in the middle of Silver Falls on a Sunday morning while families were walking to church." Jake's hand instinctively moved toward his Colt again, but Esteban held up a weathered palm. "Peace, boy. I'm not judging your actions. The Reynolds gang were animals who deserved killing. But you chose to do it in public, in front of witnesses, which means you chose to become a wanted man. That's on you. The sheriff's brother shouldn't have tried to stop you, and you probably shouldn't have shot him. But that's a complicated moral equation, and I'm too old to solve it. What matters now is survival. You want to live through the next few days or not?" The question hung in the superheated air between them. Jake had been running on rage and grief for so long that he'd stopped thinking about actual survival. The revenge had been everything, finding the men who'd destroyed his life, making them pay in blood and screams. He'd accomplished that goal in spectacular fashion, had painted the main street of Silver Falls red with their guilty blood. But revenge, he was learning, was a destination with no roads leading away from it. You arrived there and then stood confused, wondering what came next, if anything came next. "I want to live," Jake heard himself say, and was surprised to find he meant it. I want to make it to Redemption Creek, get supplies, maybe figure out how to disappear properly. Sarah. His voice caught on her name the way it always did. She would have wanted me to survive this. She would have called me an idiot for the way I did things, but she'd want me to survive. Esteban studied him for a long moment, those sharp eyes seeming to look right through skin and bone to whatever soul might be hiding underneath. Then you'll need water, first and foremost. Man can live weeks without food, but only days without water, and you're already pushing those limits. I've got a spring about 2 miles from here, hidden in a canyon that Dutch Kincaid and his boys rode right past without seeing. We'll get you and that horse rehydrated, then I'll tell you what you need to know about Redemption Creek. Because that town, Jake Morrow, isn't what you think it is. They rode in silence, Jake following Esteban through passages between rocks that shouldn't have existed. Paths that seemed to materialize only when you looked at them from exactly the right angle. The old man moved with the confidence of someone who'd walked these trails 10,000 times, who knew every stone, and could probably navigate blind if necessary. Jake's mind raced with questions. How did Esteban know about Redemption Creek's true nature? Why was he helping a wanted man? What did he get out of this besides the satisfaction of balking Dutch Kincaid? But he kept quiet. Some answers, he'd learned, came in their own time, and some answers you didn't want to hear until you had no other choice. The spring emerged from the canyon wall like a miracle, crystal water burbling from a crack in the rock face that looked, from any other angle, like just another shadow. Esteban led Delilah to the pool that had formed at the spring's base, letting the horse drink in the careful intervals that prevented bloat after extreme thirst. Jake wanted to plunge his entire head into that water, to gulp until his stomach couldn't hold anymore, but the old man's warning hand stopped him. Slow, Esteban instructed. Your body's forgotten what water feels like. Drink too fast and you'll vomit it all back up, maybe go into shock. I've seen men die from drinking too fast after days in the desert. Stupid way to go. Jake forced himself to sip, though every cell in his body screamed for more. The water tasted like life itself, cold and clean in a way that made Silver Falls' well water seem like mud. He could feel it spreading through his system, awakening parts of him that had started shutting down. His headache began to recede, his vision clearing from the tunnel that had been narrowing his perception for miles. How long have you been living out here? He asked between careful swallows. Esteban settled onto a rock worn smooth by centuries of wind, his rifle across his knees in a position that suggested rest, but could transform into action in a heartbeat. I came to these canyons in 1867 after the war ended, and I realized I had no stomach for the so-called peace. I'd been a scout for the army, spent years learning to read terrain and track men and kill without hesitation when killing needed doing. Turned out those weren't skills that translated well to farming or shopkeeping, so I walked away from civilization and found myself here. Jake did the math in his head. 1867 to now meant Esteban had been living wild for nearly 30 years, a lifetime spent in isolation broken only by occasional supply runs. That's a long time to be alone. Doesn't it drive you crazy? No one to talk to, no company except rocks and snakes? He immediately regretted the question, recognizing it as the kind of thoughtless inquiry that city folk always threw at frontier people, as if solitude was something to be pitied rather than chosen. But Esteban just smiled, revealing teeth that had somehow remained mostly intact despite decades without a dentist. I'm not alone. I've got the desert, and the desert talks if you know how to listen. Besides, crazy is a relative concept. You spend enough time around people and you realize that most of them are already crazy. They just hide it better behind social conventions and polite lies. Out here you can be honest about your demons instead of pretending they don't exist. Speaking of which, you ready to talk about what really happened in Silver Falls? Jake's hand tightened around his canteen. He'd been expecting this question, had actually been surprised it took this long to arrive. I already told you. The Reynolds gang killed Sarah and our unborn child. I tracked them down and made them pay. The sheriff's brother got in the way. The facts were simple, brutal, undeniable. But facts, Jake was learning, rarely told the whole truth. The sheriff's brother, Esteban repeated slowly, was named Thomas Garrett, 23 years old, fresh back from a year at university in St. Louis, where his family had sent him to get educated. By all accounts, a good kid, maybe a little naive about how violence really works, but decent. He tried to talk you down, tried to get you to surrender peaceful-like so you could tell your story to a judge. And you shot him in the chest, dropped him in the street while his brother watched from the sheriff's office window. That about cover it? Jake felt rage flare in his chest, hot and defensive. He had a gun. He was drawing on me. What was I supposed to do? Let him arrest me so they could hang me for killing men who deserved killing? The law failed me, old man. The law failed Sarah. Those animals came to our ranch. And where were the marshals? Where was justice? So I made my own justice. And if Thomas Garrett got caught in the middle of that, then that's the price of standing between a man and what's rightfully his. Rightfully his, Esteban echoed. And something in his tone made Jake feel like a child being chided by a patient schoolteacher. You think revenge belongs to you like a piece of property? You think violence is something you own? Something you can claim as yours by right? That's where men go wrong, Jake Morrow. They start thinking their pain gives them permission to inflict pain. Their trauma justifies their trauma-making. And maybe in your case there's a kernel of righteousness to it. The Reynolds gang truly were animals. But Thomas Garrett wasn't. He was just a kid trying to do his job, trying to prevent more bloodshed. And you killed him for it. The words hit Jake harder than any fist could have. Maybe because they echoed thoughts he'd been trying to suppress for days. He'd replayed that moment 1,000 times in his mind. Thomas stepping forward, hand moving toward his gun, voice saying something about please and peaceable and judge. Had the boy actually been drawing or just gesturing? Had the threat been real or manufactured by Jake's rage-soaked perception? The doubt had been eating at him like acid, making every mile of his flight feel heavier than the last. So what? Jake finally spat. I should turn myself in? Confess my sins and accept whatever punishment they decide? That'll bring Thomas back to life? That'll bring Sarah back? Esteban stood, shouldering his Winchester with practiced ease. I'm not telling you what you should do, boy. I'm telling you what you need to understand before you ride into Redemption Creek thinking it's some kind of sanctuary. That town's got a name that promises one thing but delivers something else entirely. You want to know why Dutch Kincaid went there ahead of you? Because Redemption Creek isn't a hiding place. It's a trap. And you're about to walk right into it unless you listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you. They sat in the shade of the canyon wall, the springs gurgling providing a soundtrack to Esteban's explanation. Redemption Creek, he told Jake, had been founded 20 years ago by a group of ex-Confederates who'd refused to accept the war's outcome. They'd created a settlement far from federal authority, a place where old grievances could be nursed and old hatreds preserved. But over time, the settlement's purpose had shifted. The original founders had died or moved on, replaced by a different breed of resident. Now the town's run by a man called Magnus Cole, Esteban explained, his voice carrying the weight of someone sharing dangerous knowledge. Former judge who got disbarred for accepting bribes and falsifying trial records. He fled west before they could lock him up, brought his particular skills to Redemption Creek. Magnus figured out something clever. He could make money by offering sanctuary to wanted men, but only if he could guarantee that bounty hunters and marshals would find those men eventually. You follow the logic? Jake felt ice forming in his veins despite the desert heat. He tips off the hunters, takes payment from the fugitives for protection, then sells their locations to whoever's chasing them. Double profit, and nobody in his town ever knows who to trust because anyone could be working for Magnus. It was brilliant in its cruelty, a perfect exploitation of desperate men who'd run out of options. Exactly, Esteban confirmed. And Dutch Kincaid is Magnus's favorite customer. They've got an arrangement going back years. Dutch lets Magnus know who he's hunting. Magnus signals when that person arrives in town, and they split whatever bounty money comes from the capture. Sometimes the fugitives put up a fight and it gets messy, but that's actually good for business. Makes other runners think twice before trusting anyone. makes them more likely to pay Magnus's insurance fees that don't actually insure anything. Jake wanted to punch something, to scream at the unfairness of finding hope only to have it revealed as another form of trap. He'd been riding toward Redemption Creek like it was the promised land, a place where his past couldn't follow. Instead, it was just another scheme, another example of how the West's myth of freedom and opportunity got twisted by men willing to profit from others' desperation. "So I'm finished," he said flatly. "If I ride into town, Dutch catches me. If I don't ride into town, I die of thirst or exposure in the desert. Those are my options?" Esteban pulled something from his vest pocket, a piece of paper, folded and refolded until its creases had worn soft. He handed it to Jake without ceremony. "There's a third option, but it's not pretty and it'll cost you more than money. There's a woman in Redemption Creek named Catherine Reeves. She runs the only honest business in town, a boarding house on the north edge of settlement. Catherine came west after her husband was killed in the war, built that boarding house from nothing, and somehow managed to stay outside Magnus Cole's web of corruption. She doesn't trust easy, and she doesn't help often, but when she does help, she commits fully." Jake unfolded the paper, finding a hand-drawn map with landmarks and distances marked in neat handwriting. "Why would she help me? What makes me special compared to the 100 other wanted men who've probably knocked on her door?" He studied the map, noting that it showed a route into Redemption Creek that avoided the main streets, a path that hugged the creek bed and entered town through what looked like someone's back property. "You're not special," Esteban said bluntly, "but your situation might appeal to her sense of justice. You killed men who genuinely deserved killing, even if you did it in the worst possible way. Catherine's got strong opinions about justice versus law, about how they're supposed to be the same thing but rarely are. She might see you as someone worth saving, or she might turn you away and let Dutch have you. That's her choice to make, not mine to predict. But she's your only chance that doesn't end with you dead or in chains." Jake folded the map carefully, tucking it inside his shirt where sweat would keep it pressed against his skin. "You said it would cost more than money. What's the price for Catherine's help, assuming she decides to give it?" He met Esteban's eyes, preparing himself for whatever hard truth was coming next. The old man had been nothing but honest so far, and Jake suspected that pattern would continue, even when the honesty hurt. Esteban's expression turned grave, the lines on his face deepening like canyons. "The price is truth, Jake Morrow. Complete, unvarnished truth about what happened in Silver Falls, including the parts you don't like to think about, the moments that haunt you at 3 in the morning. Catherine can smell a lie like wolves smell blood, and if you try to sell her a sanitized version of events, she'll send you back out into Dutch Kincaid's waiting arms without a second thought. You want her help? You confess everything, not just to her, but to yourself." The demand felt impossibly hard, like being asked to reach into his own chest and pull out his heart for inspection. Jake had been running from certain truths even faster than he'd been running from Dutch's posse, had been constructing elaborate justifications and righteous anger to avoid confronting the core of what he'd done. "What if the truth is ugly?" he asked quietly. "What if confessing it out loud makes me into the villain instead of the wronged husband seeking justice?" "Then that's what you are," Esteban replied without hesitation. "The desert doesn't care about your story, Jake. It doesn't care if you're a hero or a villain or something complicated in between. It just cares if you can survive it. Same with Catherine Reeves. She won't judge you based on whether your story makes you look good. She'll judge you based on whether you're honest enough to admit what you've become. There's a difference between a man who kills in rage and knows it, and a man who kills in rage and pretends it was something noble. Catherine helps the first kind. She turns away the second." Jake drank more water, letting the cold liquid buy him time to think. Could he do it? Could he stand in front of a stranger and admit that in the moment he'd shot Thomas Garrett, part of him had wanted to shoot anyone, that the rage had been so consuming he'd almost hoped someone would try to stop him so he could pour more violence into the world? Could he confess that some dark corner of his soul had felt satisfaction when the sheriff's brother fell, because it meant someone else's family now knew the pain of sudden, meaningless loss? "There's something else you should know," Esteban continued, his voice gentler now. Catherine lost her son 5 years ago to a bounty hunter's bullet. Boy was 17, got caught up with the wrong crowd, made some stupid decisions about stealing horses. He was trying to surrender when the hunter shot him, claimed the kid was reaching for a weapon. No trial, no chance to make things right. Just a dead boy in the street and a bounty collected. So when Catherine looks at you, she's going to see echoes of that hunter. Someone who decided execution was easier than mercy. But she's also going to see echoes of her son. Someone who made terrible choices but maybe didn't deserve the worst consequence. You'll be both things to her simultaneously. Whether she can reconcile that paradox enough to help you, I honestly don't know. Jake felt the weight of this information settling on his shoulders like physical mass. Why are you telling me all this? Why help me at all? You could have let that rattlesnake bite Delilah. Could have let me wander into Redemption Creek blind and ignorant. Instead, you're giving me information and options and a map to the one person who might actually help. What's in it for you? The question came out harsher than intended. Suspicion born from days of running making trust impossible. The old man was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant as if seeing through the canyon walls to some far horizon. I told you I came out here after the war, after I realized I didn't fit in the world people were building. What I didn't tell you is why I didn't fit. I was a scout, Jake, a good one. I tracked Confederate raiders and helped Union forces catch them, which usually meant killing them since trials weren't practical during wartime. I told myself it was necessary, that I was serving a greater good, and maybe I was. But I also know I got too comfortable with it, started seeing men as problems to solve rather than lives to preserve. When the war ended, and they wanted me to keep doing basically the same job against outlaws and renegades, I finally understood what I'd become. A government-sanctioned killer who'd stopped asking difficult questions. Esteban turned his sharp eyes back to Jake, and there was unexpected pain visible in their depths. I walked away before I could do any more damage, before I could become the kind of man who shoots first and feels nothing after. But I've carried the weight of every life I took, justified or not, for 30 years. When I look at you, I see a younger version of myself standing at a crossroads. You can keep running, keep killing when cornered, keep building that wall between who you were and who you're becoming. Or you can stop, face what you've done, and try to find some path back to being human. I'm helping you because I hope you'll choose the second path. Because if you do, maybe it means the first path wasn't inevitable. Maybe it means I had a choice too back then, and just didn't see it. The confession hung between them like smoke, too substantial to ignore, but too intangible to grasp directly. Jake realized that Esteban wasn't just offering information or assistance. He was offering a warning, a glimpse of what lay at the end of the road Jake was traveling. You could survive, the old man seemed to be saying, but survival alone wasn't enough. You had to figure out what you were surviving for, who you wanted to be when the running finally stopped. Otherwise, you ended up like Esteban, alive but isolated, breathing but not really living, waiting in the desert for death or redemption, whichever arrived first. "I'll do it," Jake said finally, surprised by the steadiness in his own voice. "I'll find Catherine Reeves and tell her the truth. All of it, even the ugly parts. Even the parts that make me look like exactly the kind of man Thomas Garrett was trying to stop. And if she turns me away, if she decides I'm too far gone to deserve help, then I'll accept that. But I won't keep lying to myself about what happened in Silver Falls. I'm done with that." As he spoke the words, Jake felt something shift inside him, like a locked door finally opening after years of being sealed shut. The truth might not set him free. He wasn't naive enough to believe that anymore. But maybe, just maybe, it would let him stop running from himself while he ran from Dutch Kincaid. Esteban nodded slowly, something like approval crossing his weathered features. He stood, offering Jake his hand in a gesture that somehow carried the weight of a sacred pact. "Then rest here for the night. Let your horse recover fully. Let yourself recover. Come first light, you'll follow that map into Redemption Creek and find Catherine Reeves. And Jake..." The old man's grip tightened slightly. "Whatever happens after you knock on her door, don't let them take you alive. Dutch Kincaid likes to make examples of the men he catches, likes to parade them through towns as warnings. You deserve better than being someone's cautionary tale. Jake Morrow spent that night under the stars, listening to the desert silence and thinking about Sarah, about Thomas Garrett, about the man he'd been and the man he'd become. The truth was waiting for him in Redemption Creek, along with Catherine Reeves and Dutch Kincaid, and whatever fate the universe had prepared. But for one more night he could exist in between, neither hunted nor captured, neither guilty nor absolved. Just a man, alone with his thoughts, preparing to face whatever judgment awaited when the sun rose on his last ride into town. The desert kept its secrets, and come morning, Jake Morrow would add one more to its collection. The truth about what happens when revenge stops being enough and a man has to decide what comes after. Whether that decision would save him or damn him remained to be seen.